Okay, we're going live. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Securus Safe Space Podcast, Episode 1. In this podcast, we'll be discussing about things that attribute towards creating safer, inclusive, and happier workplaces. I'm your host, Viji, and in each episode, we'll bring to you in depth interviews with industry leaders, industry best practices, and stories of personal growth. This episode is Pride Month special. Happy Pride to all. I'd like to welcome our guest, Chandra. Let me introduce Chandra. Chandra Duraiswamy has 27 years of experience in marketing communication and thrived across multiple sectors, geographies, and cultures. He has humanized brands, leaders, and employees to drive business results. He is a strategic communicator, storyteller, DEI champion, and NHRDN awardee. Building a culture of trust, empathy, and high performance through communication is his forte. Welcome to the podcast, Chandra. Very happy to have you.
Thank you, Viji. Happy Pride Month to you and to all our audiences. Um, this gives me a great opportunity to have a conversation with you, and I'm so looking forward to it.
Lovely. So let's dive straight into the conversation. So, Chandra, we'll start with your personal experiences. So, you've been calling yourself a strategic communicator and a storyteller. So, let's look at how and why you got into storytelling and how your personal experiences shaped the professional path significantly.
Absolutely. That's a great question to start with. Just like how people say charity begins at home, I feel inclusion also begins at home. I grew up in a joint family. My father was an agriculturist come industrialist, so which means I have a very different background. I grew up in a joint family. When you define joint family today, they probably think a mother, father, and a child is joint family. That's not the case. I lived with my father's siblings. We had 15 children in the house, and in total, there were like 22 people in the house where I grew up. So, which means I need to have a lot of give and take. I need to be patient. I need to negotiate what I want. I need to do all of that in order to peacefully coexist with other inmates of the house. Not just that, inclusion was something that I saw in every facet of that house and on everybody's behavior as well, all the elders at home. My mother, for example, she would bring home girl children from underprivileged background, economically weaker sections. They would live with us. She would send them to school. She would give them the life skills, and eventually she got them placed and got them married. So she's done that multiple times. So which means I've had the opportunity to grow up in such a family. My father, on the other side, 1984 when we had the floods in Chennai, dad was the first one to set up kitchens in the backyard.
We lost Chandra. Just hope to get Chandra back in a minute. So while we wait for Chandra, audiences, if you have any specific questions, do keep posting in your comments. Yes, Chandra, you're back.
Sorry about that. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, loud and clear.
I don't know where you lost me so that I can continue my story.
You're talking about your mother, how she brought in children and got them married from girls
Yeah.
from under.
And father on the other side was equally inclusive. In 1984, when we had the floods in Chennai, dad was the first one to set up a kitchen in the backyard. Said, let's cook for people who are homeless and whose homes have been flooded. And those were my first lessons of inclusion at home, where we thought about people not in the family, but around in our neighborhood. And that continued. 2015, fast forward, when I had an opportunity, when Chennai went through another floods, I couldn't stay quiet. I actually took time off from work and I was out there. We set up kitchens. We were able to take blankets to people. And for 6 months, every other weekend, I had organized medical camps in areas where they did not have primary health centers. So inclusion was the first lesson that was taught to us at home. So for me, trying to take inclusion from home to work was so natural. I didn't have to do much. Even today, when I go into work, when I see people eating by themselves, I'm like, oh, you're not allowed to eat by yourself. Just join us, so that they don't feel excluded. They feel included and welcomed. So that is how I've always been as a person.
Lovely, lovely, wonderful, wonderful. And that is where all the stories are driving in, right? Lovely. So you've been recognized for your commitment to diversity and inclusion, both in your storytelling and in fostering workplace cultures. Could you share how your identity has played a role in shaping these commitments and possibly provide insights into some of the challenges and victories you encountered along the way?
There's no one particular identity to a person. This is something that I say. We all carry multiple identities. You may be coming from a particular caste or a religion, that is one identity. You may be coming from a particular gender, that is another identity. You may have a certain belief or faith, that is another identity. You may be coming from a certain region of the country, that is an identity. You may be eating a certain cuisine, that is again an identity. But many times what happens is people don't display all these identities at the same time. Every time when they have to establish their presence, or when they find people of same kind, it is like dropping a card. So they just drop that identity. They use that identity to build that connection. And that is because you're trying to use your identity to create a safe space, not just for
Right.
yourself, but also for others. And that's how I've always looked at identity. Identities are multiple fold, just like how you see so many people on my shirt today. Those are so many identities that I carry with myself. For example, I worked in a multicultural environment, and I worked in multiple geographies. So, which means I have to first understand other people, and I also have to give an opportunity for them to understand me. The first thing that I did when I went to work in my Paris office for a period of 3 years is I started to take an extra box of homemade lunch every day. Because every time I would heat up lunch in the cafeteria, people would say, I smell something delicious. What is it? And they would just smell and they would just follow their nose and come to my table. I realized that this is a great opportunity for me to build new relationship. So I said, every day I'm going to bring in an extra box of food. I'm going to heat it up. I'm going to leave multiple spoons on the table. I'm going to let people taste Indian cuisine. And this is how I started to build my relationship with them. So this is one of the identities. Similarly, many times people also feel that they may have to underplay their particular identity to actually make the other person feel included. That is not really the case. You will have to be comfortable with your identity, and then you will have to ensure that you also bring along other people. That is true inclusion. At this point, I'd like to share an example that from 2016, I was working for Capgemini at that time, and I had a manager or a boss at that time, Dalen Lutzenberger. Just prior to Pride Month, Dalen emailed me his coming out story. He said, Chandra, can you just edit this and get this on our website? I edited the story and I sent him the revised version. And then I told him, I said, Dalen, with birds of same feather. And it just stopped there. I didn't say anything more. And Dalen, on the other front, he was my manager. So he said every other week when we had the call, a checkpoint call, he would say, Chandra, what can you do for the LGBTQ community in India? And that time 377 was still in place. But he said, doesn't matter. We need to treat people respectfully. So can you go back, talk to HR and the legal? Can you use my shoulders and my ID card to open doors for you?
Wow.
Had I not had a role model and a mentor like Dalen, I would not be the person I am today. I would not be taking my identity everywhere and using it to open doors for me, and specifically a lot of CEOs and the leadership team in organizations. G also helped me take my identity further. When I joined GE, I told them, I said, see, I will join your organization provided, in addition to my day job, you also give me a gay job, meaning that I would love to run the Pride Network.
Wow.
And looking back, I feel so empowered that I've worked for such global organization and leaders who've actually helped me comfortably bring my identity to the workplace. and to ensure that I can create a safe working space for a lot of my colleagues as well. And many times when I bring this particular identity to the workplace, there are other identities that I've discovered as well. For example, a bunch of my own colleagues while I was at GE, right, they came up to me and said, I have a child who's from the LGBTQ community. How can you help us? So I said, why don't we create a safe space for parents like you who can actually share day-to-day issues, and how can we all work together? So that really worked. And another employee came up to me and said, I have an autistic child. What is it that you can help the organization do for people like us? And then the conversation was, I took the conversation forward. So sometimes you use one identity to unlock so many other invisible identities that exist in the organization. And then suddenly you seem to have that magic spell that you can help many others.
Yes, lovely, lovely. Kudos to people like Dalen. So glad that you got mentors like Dalen. And leveraging the power and the privilege, right? I think that is so very important. I'm glad he helped you do that, and not many leaders, they recognize that or leverage the privileges that they have, and that is something that's very very important, the key thing as an ally. So wonderful, thank you for that story. And you've also done some initiatives of storytelling, and I also saw one of the LinkedIn posts, the Arches of the Rainbow, right? So can you throw some light on that, Chandra?
I would love to start this conversation with a quote from Peter Drucker. He said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If organizations don't build that culture, that inclusive culture, then your strategy is going to fail. It is not going to take off. It is not going to succeed. With that, I mean, we did so many things. When I look back, right, even prior to 377 being read down, I was still working at Capgemini. So we had already asked organizations to join hands with us, and we did put together a white paper for organizations on trans inclusion at the workplace. So that was the first opportunity for us to meet them, speak to them, understand their real issues, and not work in silos. Today, many organizations, right, they all work in silos. While inclusion is a corporate India problem, it is not just a one industry or a one sector or a one organization problem. And people feel, people don't discuss their strategies with each other. Given that we invited organizations to join us and we discussed, we put out papers in terms of how can our organization, the entire organizations in Chennai can be much more trans inclusive in their attitude, in their workspace, etc. 2020, I joined GE. Like I said, I asked them for a day job in addition to a gay job. But then when I went into the organization, I said, you know what, I can do so many things. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to help create a lot more awareness in the organization. So we were able to create, I remember that particular year, despite pandemic, I was able to do so many online sessions for people managers and for employees. I remember at one point I had done 30 plus sessions that year. So which is almost like at least I had one session every week. And that was nice. So every year we said, let's prepare the organizations. There's various ways of storytelling. This is one sharing lived experience, addressing biases that people may have, the prejudices that they carry, the beliefs that they carry. Let's break all the myths that they carry. So the first year pretty much focused on the foundation. Let's address the bias. Let's address your myths. Let's help you understand a little bit more. It was education. The second year, what I did was I said, let's paint rainbow crosswalks. If you look at the rainbow colors, each of them have a particular human value. There's a human emotion attached to it. I said, why don't we paint them? If you go to San Francisco, you see rainbow crosswalks. Similarly, I said, let's paint these rainbow crosswalks at the workplace. We'll put each of those human values there. So every time a person comes into the organization, they automatically, they're reminded of these values. So they come in every day, so they see these colors, values. So when you see them, if you don't see it, just like they say, right, out of sight is out of mind. So not just trying to celebrate Pride 1 month in a year, but having Pride incorporated 365 days in a year. So these are small things. And then I looked around and I said, why just the LGBTQ community? I'm a communications person. Why not I bring out stories of other minorities in the organization? For example, I was able to interview a colleague who was in South America in my organization, woman, lesbian. Look at that beautiful intersectionality. Then I had some colleagues who had physical disability. So I had some colleagues from the veteran background. So I was able to use all this opportunity to bring out stories that were completely, otherwise it would have been buried. It would not have been there in that place. So we brought those out. And next I said the following year, why don't we turn our employees into storytellers? When I say employees into storytellers, I said, why don't we have them enact plays that build sensitivity in the workplace? So I told them, come up with a concept, address a particular bias or a discrimination, rather than having external people come and tell them how to behave, how to teach. If employees learn from their own peers, that's going to stay in their minds for a lot longer. And I am turning them into storytellers and actors. That was pretty successful. So all of this was done, the first 3 years, all of this was done within the organization. Then I said, why don't we look around? We want to create an ecosystem where there's a lot of inclusion. Why don't I invite my suppliers to join? Why don't I invite my customers to join? And then we were able to take it across the industry as well. So that really helped us to build a very inclusive organization, storytell in many ways, turn our employees into allies, and get them to share more stories of inclusion. Which I am unable to hear you.
Now audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, okay, wonderful. I'm back. I can hear you too. I don't know what that is the crazy tech glitch. Lovely. Okay, we'll get going with our conversation. I think that is brilliant examples of how you can incorporate crosswalks, colorful rainbow crosswalks to ensure year-long support for the ally. I also remember you sharing that story while we are specifically focusing on the Pride Month. But I loved your story where you said for people with disabilities, you brought in wheelchairs and you made all the leaders use that, right? So that's also one thing that, yes, you can elaborate that, please.
Exactly. There was one time where we said, many of the disabilities have to be felt. When you're building empathy, right? People really will have to experience what does it mean to be disabled. So one time we did an experiment where we put a bunch of wheelchairs on International Disability Day, World Disability Day, and we said, why don't you spend an entire day or half a day on this wheelchair and go around the city? I mean, go around the office. So people realized the privileges that they had as able people and understand the lack of privileges when you become disabled. For example, they handle the use of toilets, the where we swipe the access card, the height of the pantry in the cafeteria, so on and so small things, right? Everything suddenly became inaccessible for them. And that was the day people were really able to understand what their privileges were, and they really appreciated what being disabled meant.
Lovely, lovely. I mean, I'm glad the leaders took to the challenge. They were supportive enough to try that out. I think I wonder how many leaders are up to the challenge of sitting in a wheelchair and using the wheelchair for at least half a day. I think that is the true spirit of understanding accessibility, of realizing how heavy the door is, pushing the door, opening the door. I think that is a brilliant example. Wish we could have some magic wand like that even for the LGBTQ community, for people to realize, right? People not from the community to realize what it actually feels.
I did that experiment in another event as well, where I had placed some objects that are worn by the opposite gender. So I had bunch of objects that men wore. I had bunch of objects that women wore. So I said, you know what? For you to come into the meeting, you'll have to pick something that the opposite gender wears, and then probably have it on you, wear it on you, and sit through the meeting. And a lot of them just held it in their hand. I said, why are you feeling so uncomfortable? I said, this is exactly because you don't think this belongs to you. You want to pick something that belongs to you. That's exactly what happens with a lot of LGBTQ people as well. Because this is something that is assigned to them. They're uncomfortable. They want to get out of it. They want to be in an identity which they're comfortable and they relate to.
Wonderful, wonderful, brilliant, brilliant. That was amazing live exercise for people to try out and do that. So lovely example, Chandra. So I know you worked with 15 different brands in changing their perspectives through storytelling. Any example that you want to share with us in terms of how you transformed a particular brand or a campaign that you worked on through your storytelling?
See, not everything has been easy sell. Let me give you an example of what happened many years ago when I was traveling on that stretch in Nagasandra. This was like 3-4 years. And I had to visit our factory for one particular week every day, which is closer to Tumkur. So when I was driving every morning at the traffic light, I saw a bunch of trans people standing there. They knock on your windows. Routine, I would roll down the windows, give them money. Kept happening for one whole week. I kept asking myself on that journey, I'm like, why can't I open my door, get them to come and work with me at the workplace? So I went back and I asked my own leadership team, I said, what does it take for us to do this? Because it is not a white collar job, it's a blue collar job as well. So I'm like, why can't we look at these people to be in our offices and our plants? And the leadership readily agreed. Over a period of time. They said we'll be able to hire close to 5% of people. But then around the same time, there was a brand that was actually launching their flagship store, the second store in India, just at the same crossing. I came back that evening and I saw their marketing person had put a very nice post on LinkedIn, picture of their brand flag. I reached out to them saying that you could be a more inclusive brand by actually employing those transgenders who are right across from your store. They would beautifully fit into your organization. They would make this flag shine brighter and become more colorful. I didn't have the luck of convincing them to actually, be an inclusive brand. But I tried. I started a campaign. I approached them multiple times through multiple people. So you have to continuously keep knocking doors. There are other organizations where I've gone and given awareness and sensitization session for the leadership and for the employees, but it just stayed there. It is like you've sown the seeds, but I don't see them sprouting. They just make a post on the Pride Month just to show that they're inclusive on social media. I just call it pure optics. But then they haven't grown. But then everybody needs time. Allies are also on the spectrum and they need time to become allies. So we'll have to give that time. We've given them the education, we've given them the awareness, but it is going to take time. Currently, I don't want to name the organization. I am working with the organization where I'm interviewing their LGBTQ people to understand how the entire employee life cycle is in the organization. Many times brands think the moment I recruit, people join, I'm an inclusive brand, but don't stop there. Understand how did these people feel when they were being approached for a job? How did these people, how is the onboarding for these people? How did they build their career in the organization? So every employee touch point, I went and asked them questions about, has it been inclusive? What can be done to better? Not just that, I also went to their managers and I said, how difficult or easy was it to recruit them? Did you voluntarily ask for diversity candidates when you were opening up this position? I said, did you have to learn something for yourself? Did you make mistakes? What kind of mistakes were these? Did you apologize? When you look at your leadership pipeline, do you think of these candidates? etc. So those were the kind of questions that I asked to make sure that the brands can be made much more inclusive. It is not about launching social media campaigns around colors and panel discussions, but let's go much deeper in terms of what we can do to the brands to actually sustain this momentum of LGBTQ inclusion.
Lovely. I think wonderful, very well said. I know even I've been working with a lot of brands and I work on the entire diversity spectrum. There are a lot of big brands who come back and say, no, Viji, not yet LGBTQ, not yet people with disability. Let's start with gender. So that is something that's a low hanging fruit that they want to start off, but nowhere they want to go with other spectrums of diversity. I think so. That is something that we in at India we still have a long way to go. And also during this Pride Month, I was having a conversation with an employee who had transitioned. The employee said, "Hey, I'm so glad to work on this big brand. They gave me the opportunity to go through the surgery. I've just done this surgery partial 1 month. I've taken rest. When I came back to work, right? So the organization has given them all the facilities, the policies, this insurance, surgery allowance, everything is taken care. But the moment the employee came back after surgery, the employee said, "Hey, I changed my way of dressing, and my colleagues, my peers who were friends till then, they stopped talking to me. And they said, You're such a shame. Why are you dressing like this?" Right? So, though the organization at a high level is doing everything to make people feel inclusive, the mindset change at the root level. We still have so much longer way to go in terms of this, but I'm so glad we had this conversation. I think over the years, we've seen a drastic change in India coming in terms of awareness. So any closing remarks, Chandra? I know we can keep talking about this topic, and you'll have a lot of examples to share. But any closing remarks? What you want organizations to start off with? Those who have not started their LGBTQ journey, where should they start off? And also a tip for employees who are still insensitive or who are not yet welcoming employees from the whole LGBT community, the organization and for the individuals.
Absolutely. One, I would say organizations, rather than trying to recruit one or two people, they should look at recruiting more than that. And rather than recruiting them in one particular function, like, oh, I can take trans people, they can be my admin secretaries. Don't do that. Instead, try and give them skilling opportunity. You can use your CSR fund to actually help them skill. And then you can give them internship opportunities. Then convert them into employees in your organization. Try and find them posts across the organization, across the employee life cycle. That is one way for you to make inclusion sustainable. Number one, for organizations. Number two, make sure that your policies, your infrastructure. I went to an organization a week or 10 days ago. When I asked them, where's your gender neutral restroom? When I visited the restroom and I found the restroom is not PWD compliant. I came back and I told them the restroom is not compliant. I can send you the specs. They're like, sorry, we don't have the budget to do this. And I was so disheartened. And I'm like, you don't even have to pay me a speaking fee. Please use that budget to separate your restrooms. I really want to see that. That is my ambition. So organizations, don't ask anything for free. Set aside people, set aside budgets, and you can definitely achieve. Inclusion should be a KPI or a KRA for every employee, right from the CEO till the intern. Make sure it is across everybody's KPI, KRA. Otherwise, you will only have certain set of people who will be driving inclusion and rest of them will be lagging behind. For allies, I'm going to give allies a lot more time. Allyship is on the spectrum like gender and sexuality. A lot of people start as bystanders and then eventually they become vocal and visible allies and activists. So equip yourself with more information. If you don't understand, ask people. Don't make comments that are very rude and insensitive because you are speaking from a position of privilege. Shed the privilege, use pronouns. Recently, there was a CEO from a particular brand who had posted on LinkedIn saying that this entire pronoun is a Western import. But then here is an opportunity. Use the Pride Month to learn a little bit more about pronouns. Be inclusive in your language. that is a first step towards 365 days of pride.
Lovely, lovely. Wonderful, Chandra. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast. So that's all for today's episode of Safe Space Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Chandra Duraiswamy and gained some valuable insights on the Pride special topic. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Safe Space Podcast. Until then, stay safe and be an ally. Thank you all. Thank you, Chandra. Thanks a ton.
Thank you, everyone.